Welcome back, everyone. As it is the month of October, the scary month, the spooky month, the spooky scary month. What's more scarier than me actually uploading more than once every several months? Well, how about a mysterious monster that was sighted decades ago in good old America? What would you do if you came in contact with an incomprehensible, terrifying entity? Today, I will tell you the tale of the Enfield monster. April 25th, 1973, Enfield, Illinois. In the dark of night, a young boy, a young child named Greg Garrett, was playing in his backyard, a casual playtime. At some point during the evening, a creature, a being, an entity, appeared before the child and stamped on the boy's feet with its own supposedly 3 apparently clawed foot-like appendages, tearing his tennis shoes to shreds. The child, crying hysterically in absolute terror, wasted no time running away from the creature, back into the relative safety of his parents' house. This was the first reported incident, but the story that grabbed the attention of a university, the local media, and national news would not happen until later, exactly 30 minutes later. Garrett's neighbor, one Henry McDaniel, and his family had their own encounter with this unspeakable, incomprehensible monster. The story goes as follows. At about 9:30 in the evening, the McDaniels returned home to find 2 of their children, Henry Jr. and Lil, in a terrified state. Once the parents had asked the children what happened, they claimed that a thing had tried to break into the house through both the door and a window-mounted air conditioner whilst the parents were gone. It was at that moment they all heard a slow, scratching sound at the front door. Henry McDaniel initially thought that it was some sort of stray animal, but skeptical Henry bravely approached the door and quickly opened it. What he saw before him would have shaken even the most courageous man to their very core. What stood before him was best described as a monster.
It had 3 legs on it, a short body, and 2 little short arms coming out of its breast area, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stood 4.5 feet tall, and it was greyish coloured, and it was trying to get into the house.
Faced with the monster that had terrified his children, he swiftly backed away from the entity in sheer horror, slammed the door, stumbled to the nearby closet, and retrieved a flashlight and his .22 caliber pistol. His family stood back, stunned, watching as the situation unfolded. Henry returned to the door with conviction to defend his family and home from this monster, this entity. He threw the door open, revealing that his first vision of this unbelievable beast had not been a hallucination. McDaniel, with a mix of fear and bravery, opened fire at the monster, hitting it. But instead of it falling to the ground wounded or dead, the monster simply hissed like a wildcat at the terrified Henry McDaniel. Now, McDaniel had fired 4 shots at the thing, and then later assured anyone who asked that he had not in fact missed the terrifying entity.
When I fired that first shot, I know I hit it.
According to McDaniel, as unbelievable as it may seem, he claimed that the entity, after being shot 4 times, tore off into the night, covering an area of approximately 50 feet in a series of just 3 astonishing leaps before disappearing into the brush along the LNA railroad embankment in front of his house. And that is our first encounter with this mysterious monster ends. But this is only where the story begins. After the incident, according to reports, McDaniel quickly called the local authorities, but it was Illinois State troopers who responded to the call and arrived at the scene. Traces of the monster were mostly gone. The only remaining evidence of the encounter were a series of scratches in the siding of the McDaniels' home and dog-like prints in the yard. What made the prints so unusual was the fact that they had 6 toe pads, and even more intriguing that they represented a 3-footed animal, with one track being slightly smaller than the others, befitting the description that McDaniel gave about the entity. McDaniel believed that his encounter with the mysterious entity were a thing of the past. However, he would soon realize that he was very much wrong. On May 6th, McDaniel was startled awake in the dead of the night by the howling of some neighborhood dogs. McDaniel got out of bed, grabbed his firearm, and once more opened the front door. This time, the encounter with the creature would not be so intimate. According to McDaniel, he watched the entity at some distance. The monster was on the railroad track, casually moving around.
I saw something moving out on that railroad track. And there it stood. I didn't shoot it, or anything. It just started down the railroad track. It didn't seem to be in a hurry or anything.
It wasn't long until the press got wind of the appearances of the supposed 3-legged monster. Quickly, a media frenzy began to develop in the town. But it wasn't until McDaniel's second report that this frenzy truly kicked into overdrive. This one. McDaniel reported 2 more sightings afterwards of the alleged monster to local cops, but he said they eventually threatened him with jail time because nobody believed what he saw had been real. But McDaniel stuck by his story and still claims,
if they do find it, they'll find more than one. And it won't be from this planet, I can tell you that.
The county sheriff at the time, Roy Poshard Jr., was quite bothered, if not confused and a bit annoyed at the sudden media frenzy that was occurring, not to mention the almost paranoia that was settling in on the locals. He threatened to incarcerate McDaniel if he didn't stop inciting panic by spreading his wildly terrifying tale. To escalate the situation even further, there came the amateur so-called monster hunters who started patrolling the area near the LNA railroad track sidings. 2 days later, from the WWKI radio interview during one of these so-called patrols that 5 young men allegedly had run in with a creature identical to the one that Garrett and McDaniel encountered, with the one added detail of it supposedly being hairy. According to the report, 5 men discovered the monster hiding in the underbush and proceeded to open fire on it. But very much like the initial McDaniel case, their bullets were unable to cause any injury, and the monster bolted at a speed far beyond what a human could achieve, according to the 5 men. The men were later charged with hunting violations, as reportedly they were drinking heavily and raising hell all the whilst quote-unquote patrolling. But now, we get to a peculiar man, the final eyewitness to this monstrosity, Rick Rainbow. He was the news director of the radio show I've mentioned a few times now, the WWKY in Kokomo, Indiana. He and 3 other individuals claimed to have seen a grey, stooping, 5-foot-tall entity lurking outside an abandoned house not far from the Garrett and McDaniel's homes. Although they did not have nearly as terrifying of an encounter as the previous witnesses, Rainbow and his crew did manage to do something that the others had not. They recorded the monster's scream. At this point, the story was becoming quite huge, and the media frenzy was only ever escalating, to a point where cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman appeared in town to investigate the eyewitnesses' claims as well as the sound recording. Coleman also heard the haunting cry of this creature while searching an area where the eyewitnesses claimed to have seen the thing. His description of the encounter and monster goes as follows.
I traveled to Enfield. I interviewed the witnesses, looked at the sightings of the house the Enfield monster had damaged. I heard some strange banshee-like sounds and walked away bewildered.
Lauren Coleman himself is something of a legend in the cryptid sphere of things. He has written about 40 books on various encounters, cryptids, and even including the pseudoscience and subculture of cryptozoology. He is at the moment still alive and continues to be fairly prevalent in the cryptozoology circles. Lauren Coleman is also the executive director of the world's only International Cryptozoology Museum, which she founded in Portland in 2003. He has also written a comprehensive list of at least majority, if not all, known cryptids in the USA. It's a field of study he has dedicated the better half of his life to. So it's not surprising that after his encounter with the so-called Enfield monster, he swiftly featured the monster in the July 1974 edition of Fate magazine. Lauren Coleman and Jerome Clark featured Enfield horror in an article entitled Swamp Slobs Invade Illinois. Coleman even chronicled discussing this intriguing case with famed paranormal investigator as well as best-selling author of the Mothman Prophecies, John A. Keel, in his book Mothman and Other Global Encounters. Transcript from this feature from Coleman.
This reminds me of my exchange with Keel back in 1973 when we were discussing the new reports of Illinois from Enfield. On April 25, 1973, Mr. and Mrs. Henry McDaniel returned to their homes, and Henry had encountered with a thing that looked like it had 3 legs and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights and short arms on a 4.5 feet tall grayish colored body, along with the L&N railroad tracks that were in front of his house.
Several years later, Coleman, on a topic regarding the Enfield investigation once more, he compared it with another he conducted regarding a legendary creature that many assume was also from, had alien origin. A melon-headed monster known as the Dover Demon.
The Enfield horror was my case investigation. It was much different than the Dover Demon, however, and was more like a combo phantom kangaroo, devil monkey, and swamp ape situation.
Now, with all of this insanity occurring and eruptions of all kinds of stories, media frenzy and everything, other investigators got involved and had even suggested that it could be connected with UFO sightings that were reported in the region during the same time, or roughly around the same time. And those with a more supernatural leaning and beliefs, of course, suggested the fairly usual, culprit of, demons because of the aggressive behavior. It's a demon. The speculations of there being some kind of ET occult connection is not the first time it's been suggested. And the situations are not inherently connected. However, one of the main witnesses in a similar situation, called the Northport Devil case, the witness in this case being Michael Rowley, claimed that the entity that had been skulking around the house he shares with his son in the West Florida community of Northport, it's a demon. It's a demon stuck in the house, or an alien from hell. Because why not? Aliens from hell. The story, however, does not yet end, as in 1941 and 1942, in the sleepy village of Mount Vernon, a village only 40 or so miles away from Enfield. There was its own encounters that occurred in this town, involving an enormous leaping beast that had terrorized the population. It was also supposedly responsible for a large amount of animal deaths in the region. Eyewitnesses claimed that the Mount Vernon monster was vaguely baboon-like, hence the devil monkey analogy, and able to leap 20 to 40 feet in a single leap. Popular websites and theories nowadays suggest that the Enfield monster could be working on a 30-year cycle. Now, according to media reports and news from cryptozoologists nowadays, there isn't a single reputable account or report on the Enfield monster, at least not in the 21st century. Whatever this creature is, or is not, it has not been reported on in almost 40 years. However, that does not mean that it's not still lurking in the shadows, waiting in a bush of some old train yard, waiting to return to scratch on another door in the wee hours of the night. As you never know what lurks in the darkness, or do you? Prior to the pre-mentioned WWKI radio call from Mr. McDaniel, investigators, as mentioned, were out to investigate the situation and claims being made, at which point, after interviewing nearby residents, they were told that Greg Garrett, the little boy that made the first claim, a neighbor of Mr. McDaniel, the boy who encountered the monster and had his shoes torn to shreds. Yeah, well, the little boy later told Western Illinois University researchers and supposed investigators that his report was a quote-unquote hoax to tease Mr. McDaniel and have fun with an out-of-town newsman. The incidents were reported widely in the press at the time. It appeared in newspapers throughout the state on the 27th of April 1973, and on the 7th of May there was an interview on radio station VGN Chicago and articles in the Chicago Daily News, the Moline Dispatch, Campaign Urban Courier, and the Alton Telegraph. There were earlier articles in the Carmi Times, and an updated summary of the events appeared in Pennsylvania's Reading Eagle in August 1973. After the arrest of the 5 men who had arrived to quote-unquote hunt the creature, residents of Enfield expressed fears that the press coverage would lead to further monster hunters who might inadvertently shoot citizens or livestock or God knows what else. In 1978, researchers at Western Illinois University, that was mentioned before, headed by David L. Miller, investigated and analyzed the incident. As it was everywhere at the time, the media still being in a frenzy, a lot of the local town encapsulated by the very topic or concerned about it. Eventually the university published a case study in Social Contagion. The researchers found there were no more than 3 first-hand reports that had subsequently been exaggerated by news. And, of course, local gossip into a fairly close concept to an epidemic. So, something that began with 3 eyewitnesses was escalated several times over by the media, local gossip, and everything else, creating the frenzy that was witnessed and tolerated at the time.
In this area of southern Illinois, it is not unreasonable to assume Mr. McDaniel or the radio news team had actually seen an animal. People we interviewed framed the recent events in these terms. Their accounts admitted the possibility that large dogs, calves, bears, deer, and wildcats had been sighted. Some frames suggested that an exotic pet, such as an ape or a kangaroo, was the catalyst for the monster reports. Finally, some people tactfully suggested that Mr. M had a notoriously overactive imagination and had probably been shooting at shadows. In any event, we interviewed only one person who agreed with Mr. M's claims that he had indeed seen a monster from outer space.
As there have been no further incidents, no other reputable reports, no other sightings, I propose a question. Do you think the Enfield monster was real? Do you think there is an entity roaming railroad tracks in the little town of Enfield or nearby, waiting in the bushes of old railroad yards to leap at an unsuspecting prey? Or was it, as investigators and the Southern Illinois University believed at the time, that this was nothing more than a case of media frenzy escalated by the media based on a handful of first-hand eyewitness reports? Speculating on that is what makes topics like this I find interesting, so carry on. And with that being said and done, thanks for watching this video. It's been a while, but I'm getting back to uploading. Once more, I want to thank my Patreons, especially Rozarah for being my one and only $100 patron. It's very lovely. Also, Aftal, thank you for being a patron. It's very much appreciated. I'm really bad at plugging my own stuff, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I will work on more videos. I will be uploading more. I don't know when, but probably not in 6 months. It's probably going to be a bit less of a time this time. I hope. So with that all being said and done, thanks for watching. See you next time. Illinois State Troopers